Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Huffman. The $1.5 billion that we're now anticipating appropriating, in addition to the $5 billion that was appropriated last session, in addition to the $1 billion that was appropriated the session before, in addition to the $2 billion that was appropriated during the special session after the prior special session, in addition to the $2 billion that was then taken through budget execution in between the two sessions, this extra $1.5 billion, did that come at the request of DPS? Sorry, that was a lot of information.
I'm not sure what the question is.
We're proposing another $1.5 billion, with emphasis on another. The origins of this bill, was it a request from DPS that says we need another $1.5 billion to carry out the duties that you've charged us with?
Not to my knowledge.
Did it come from the Facilities Commission or anybody else involved with border enforcement?
I don't know who all was part of the discussion. As you know, the governor put this on the call, so I'm going to say that the request came from the governor himself.
So I have an amendment here that I'm not going to offer because it's very smart alecky.
Wouldn't do that, would you?
I know that's shocking.
That's not your style.
It would appropriate the entirety of the rainy day fund to build a wall, yeah, which I know everyone would, I think everyone would reject. It's hyperbole. But I wanted to do this little stunt that I'm not going to do because I'm way too mature for that. I want to know, when we get a request from the governor's office for additional funds for border enforcement and we say no, because it doesn't seem to me that we do. It seems whenever they have some sort of political crisis and we need to drum up enthusiasm, we have a border crisis and we write them a check for $2 billion or $1 billion or whatever it is. So is 1.5 the right number, or is there a bigger number we would write if they asked for more?
I think this was a thoughtful number based on what the Facilities Commission believes they can actually accomplish within the time period before there would be some other form of appropriation. So it was based on actual data and the work that the Facilities Commission has been doing. Senator Hinojosa had some questions yesterday about why the urgency when we just had, the fiscal year just started, and why didn't they ask that before? And I pointed out to him that we started the budget process, it's hard to believe, but I started on boards of review a year ago, just about right now, at the end of October, November. So at that point, you're getting requests from the Facilities Commission and the governor's office. And at that point, the Facilities Commission was working on the governor's office on a set of facts, believing that they could get a certain amount of landowners agreements in place and proceed and could use a certain amount of money. Since that time, they've done a lot better in acquiring these landowner agreements. The dam sort of broke, and they had an opportunity to speed up the process. And there is an urgent need. I mean, I think we can all agree, Republican or Democrat, that what's going on at the border is wrong. It has to stop. It's bad for everyone. It is a humanitarian crisis.
I think everybody agrees.
I mean, we all agree with that. So is this a perfect solution? No, it's just a tool. It's just, the experts tell us that the walls work. Again, they're not perfect, but they act as a deterrent. They can push migrants to the legal points of entry. They can do all kind of things to be helpful in this problem. So we have the money to spend. It is a priority of many Texans. It's a priority of this Senate, and we're proceeding forward.
No, actually, the exchange is helpful because I just learned something, that the number here is calculated based on the ability to actually burn it, to use it to build segments of wall. It's a realistic, it's not an assessment of what would be the most effective appropriation, it's how fast can we use the money. So if they could build it 10 times faster, would we allocate 10 times more? I mean, what's the end goal here?
Well, that's not for me to decide, right? I'm not the one who's going to determine what the final plan is for the protection of our state and our country. I mean, we would hope that there would be a federal solution, right? That's probably a much bigger discussion than what we need to have today. But we had very clear evidence yesterday, and this came from a participant in I think someone from the public, who made it very clear that, and Senator Gutierrez made this point as well, that, this is an issue that's gone on through Republican and Democrat administrations, but Obama, Clinton, other Democratic presidents have worked towards the goal of securing the border. Biden, on the other hand, by his policies, almost seems to have intentionally exacerbated the crisis. And this, getting rid of the Remain in Mexico policy and so forth, that was really making a difference. And, Obama and Clinton had similar type of stricter immigration policies in place that were something that we could work with as a state. We don't have that any longer. And the numbers are appalling and frightening as to the numbers that are crossing the border. And we don't know what else to do but to use the tools that we have and the abilities that we have as lawmakers to try to solve the problem. You've
thrown me so many things I don't know which to respond to. I mean, first of all, some of the statements you're making are not universally agreed. For example, that the Remain in Mexico policy was effective or sustainable over time, or that it was more effective than a Title VIII, which actually deports people rather than just having them be held in little cartel pens on the other side of the border. We do agree that we have a crisis at the border. I think we agree that it is largely the product of global migration forces. We share a frustration with the Biden administration in addressing the problem. I personally think they should have had a really coherent, effective plan on day one, and it should have involved troops, it should have involved technology, it should have involved judges, social workers, agreements with other countries. It should have been on day one. It wasn't there. Are you aware of what they're doing right now?
Who's they?
Well, the Biden administration, the $25 billion they've now requested for border enforcement, which is consistent with the 23 they had the prior session, which is roughly equivalent to what Trump was doing during his time in office.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Well, they have appropriated those funds in the prior 2 years. Has anyone from this chamber or this building made any attempt to go visit the Biden administration and talk about the border?
I believe that there have been delegations, and it's certainly our congressional delegation. We all have constant contact with them requesting that they...
Interesting to hear more about it. In the meantime, you mentioned that this is effective. Through all the testimony yesterday, and I admit I didn't hear all of it, I don't recall anybody testifying that they could give any assurances that building the wall as proposed in this bill is going to have any effect on the net flow of migration into the state.
I think that the testimony was that walls are effective. I don't think anyone can give a specific, data points of how many people were deterred or how many people, went to a legal point of entry, an accepted point of entry, rather than to try to cross, these rural, remote areas.
Dangerous areas, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if we have data points that can say, X number were deterred. But those who are down there and those that testified and those who study the issue say that the walls are effective. And they use specifically the example of where the wall is very effective and where the border is very controlled, say at California, at Tijuana, and those areas where it did completely just almost knocked out.
And there were hundreds of miles of wall in place before even Donald Trump took office, right? That under, not China, that under, from Reagan to Clinton to Bush to Obama, wall has been built over the decades and deemed to be effective. And they put it in the places where they thought a wall would be effective, as opposed to the places where they wouldn't. So what's left is these sections that prior Congresses under Democratic and Republican control have deemed places where building a wall wouldn't be so effective. And yet here we're going to build a 50-mile swath, and we had all our experts yesterday testify that a wall can be effective. We don't know if this one will be. And from a standpoint of fiscal conservatism, I'm a little hesitant to just throw $1.5 billion at something when we really don't have assurances. We kept talking about this in the grid. Can you assure me that people are going to build if we do this? And people were upset that we couldn't assure them. If you could assure me that we're going to see a material decrease in illegal immigration and a material decrease in human trafficking and the flow of drugs into this state, as a result of this, I'd be inclined to support it. But through the hearing yesterday, I don't feel assured at all. It feels more like a political rallying cry at a time when there's a lot of friction within the Republican Party, and this has a nice unifying effect. But you think this is genuinely going to help?
I think it will make a difference, yes.
Okay, thank you
In
for
a positive
tolerating my
way,
questions.
Yes.